Hey there. Okay, so today we are talking about blood sugar. I wanted to show you guys a little preview of what the Habit Kickstarter group got to go through this last week. Because I had a bunch of questions on blood sugar, so we did this presentation, but I'm just going to show you a little bit of it because I really want to mainly answer the question, what does normal blood sugar look like? So we'll just keep it simple and hopefully not too long today, but I just want to go through that because a lot of questions have come up. So basically just some foundational knowledge here. So blood glucose is the same as blood sugar. Glucose equals sugar, and when we talk about blood glucose, that is really just the energy that is available in our bloodstream for energy, for absorption out of the blood into our cells to use it. So if we look here, so one, why should we care if our blood sugar is chronically high on a very long-term basis, even if it can just cause a lot of damage. So it damages blood vessels, your eyes, your nerves, your kidneys, increased risk of other chronic diseases, diabetes, obviously, heart disease, cancer as well. And it's a super early sign of dysfunction. So it's something that's run all the time and you can absolutely keep tabs on and act early on. So this is a really key point here. So these are all the hormones. So 1, 2, 3, 4 hormones that increase your blood sugar. And then, so just to run through them, glucagon hormone, it stores glucose in your liver and muscles for use later. Cortisol, stress hormone, increases your blood sugar when you're running away from that lion, so you make sure that you have enough energy for your muscles to use. Epinephrine, another hormone that will increase your blood sugar. Norepinephrine, food obviously will increase your blood sugar as well. And then this is the hormone that lowers it, insulin. That's it. That's the only hormone that lowers your blood sugar. So this is a big indication of our body has redundancies for things that are very, very important. So historically, keeping our blood sugar up has been very important. That's why we have 4+ ways to do it, right? Versus the body's like, nah, we only need one way to lower blood sugar because that doesn't happen too often. So insulin, and if we run out of insulin or insulin's not working, then we get into really big trouble, right? Exercise will lower your blood sugar as well. More muscle mass you have, that will obviously absorb a lot of sugar from your blood as well. And this is quite often why athletes need higher carbohydrate diet. They have a lot of exercise to do, a lot of muscle mass to support, etc. So a little bit of, what are some of those basic terms that you need to know. But this goes into normal blood sugar patterns. I'll show you a graph here because I'm a visual person. So this is a graph, see if I can make that bigger, of a normal non-diabetic blood glucose and insulin levels. So you can see these lines here. This is where we're going to eat. So breakfast, lunch, dinner. And in green here is the blood glucose. So this is the energy available in my blood. So I just ate, probably had some carbohydrates at the meal, so my glucose goes up. But you can see here in response to that, insulin drastically increases. So when your body senses that, it's a flood of insulin, but notice it doesn't last too long, right? So, and then I have another meal and it goes up again and then it controls it back to baseline. And you kind of do this up and down pattern all the time. But look, this is a pretty narrow range. So my body really likes to keep it in that range and not have these super high peaks of glucose and up and down, up and down. So this is a normal non-diabetic person with natural insulin secretion. Also notice that this doesn't ever completely go away. So there's a little bit of insulin in circulation all the time, but very low levels, and then we eat and then it's a rapid burst and then it goes away. So we don't want super high insulin in our bloodstream for a really long time because again, insulin is pulling that sugar out of our bloodstream and it could drop it too low, and that's not good either. I think they also have some graphs here. Again, yeah, just illustrating like where your body's trying to keep that level of glucose here. And again, a little bit overnight, not a lot because we're not eating, we're not replenishing. But this was a really good graph to kind of illustrate what's happening. And also you can think of this graph, if you give kids a bunch of sugar, what happens? They like get really high, really energetic, and then they crash. So that is a visual or a practical demonstration of what's happening with blood sugar when we have those really high carb stuff. We can get really hyped up on energy and then we crash because again, if we have a ton of sugar and this spikes really high, way above this level that my body is comfortable with, it's going to have an even bigger spike in insulin. It's going to flood a bunch of insulin out into the system, and then you might crash harder, and that's going to bring your blood sugar down potentially below this as well. And then you're kind of riding that roller coaster all day long. You're not going to feel too good. That's a good visual. Another good resource, NutriSense. This is a continuous glucose monitor system that you can order. I think you still need a prescription for it, but they had some really good ranges. And this is really important. So they have normal/optimal. They are a little bit different. Pre-diabetes and diabetes. So just to compare, so fasting blood sugar levels after 8 hours of not eating. So generally that's when you wake up in the morning, right? Minimum of 70. So you don't want it too much lower than that. Maximum of 90. But normal is considered up to 100. And then when we get up to 100, that's where we can potentially classify someone. This is usually based off of hemoglobin A1C and other lab marker as well, but pre-diabetes range. So if you're waking up after having not eaten for eight plus hours and your blood sugar is 100 to 125, you could be classed as pre-diabetic. And diabetic is someone who has a fasting blood sugar of 126 or above 126. And then if we eat after a meal, and again, we want to keep it within that range. So if I'm spiking really high, that could be a sign of dysfunction. So if it goes over 140 to 180, if it goes more than 200, that's a sign of diabetes. When it goes, hopefully it doesn't go much higher than 140. So a spike of like 40 or 30 points is what is quote normal or optimal. But this is where, so you see this gap here, right? So normal/optimal up to 90, and then pre-diabetes doesn't start to 100. So you have that 10-point range where you're not pre-diabetes, right? And so I thought this was a really interesting study here. This study is called Fasting Plasma Glucose Levels Within the Normoglycemic Range in Children as a Predictor of Prediabetes and Type 2 Diabetes in Adulthood. So basically they followed kids for 21 years after childhood and seen if their fasting blood glucose levels gave any indication of if they would develop prediabetes or diabetes later on in life during that follow-up period. So this was really interesting. They found that the prevalent rate of adult diabetes status by quartile baseline childhood fasting blood sugar showed an adverse trend of prediabetes and diabetes with the apparent threshold. So this is where they started to see disease start to occur, with apparent threshold occurring at or above 50th percentile, and that is at the 86. So if you're above 86, if we go back to that graph that NutriSense had, it had that optimal normal range of 70 to 90. So for this study, they found if your blood sugar as a kid was 86 or higher, this increased your risk of developing prediabetes or diabetes as an adult. Individuals with elevated childhood fasting blood sugar levels were 3.4 times more likely to develop prediabetes and 2.06 times more likely to develop diabetes as adults. So that's really giving more data of like, we really need to watch these levels a little bit sooner and maybe tighten our ranges a little bit so we can be preventative of, hey, if as a kid or as a young adult, I'm having a blood sugar that's consistently between 90 and 100, I really need to make some lifestyle changes and see if I can get that down a little bit before it starts to elevate and before those changes become harder. So I thought that was really interesting. I'll probably leave it about there. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of literally what normal blood sugar levels are supposed to look like. It's really this, fairly narrow range of things, up and down, etc. And this basically just goes up a little bit. If people are starting to get out of normal range, it won't come quite so low. It'll stay a little elevated. They might spike a little bit higher as that dysfunction starts to occur. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email me, Allie@parksidenutrition.com. And then we have more coming out. So this is what normal blood sugar is. We talked a little bit about what happens when it gets a little dysfunctional. Next, we're going to be talking about what can you do about it as far as nutrition, lifestyle habits, things like that to help balance your blood sugar or lower it if you're starting to see those signs of dysfunction. So stay tuned and I will talk to you then.